Okay, so I'm going to go to, Stephanie already did a great job introducing us, but Casey, if you just want to talk a little bit about your background and how you use data in your current role or in your career experience for our introductions.
Certainly. So my current role is as a system software engineer level 2 at Herzing University. And so my background comes from what I do is middleware per se. So I make systems talk to each other. In doing so, I have to translate data and take it out of certain source systems, put it in other systems, which leads me to a strong SQL background and a knowledge of professional software engineering and best practices for a full software development lifecycle. Typically, the way that I do that is through an agile or scrum methodology, which is going to be to produce working software every 2 weeks and kind of adapt that software as necessary for business users. Um, Being able to articulate requirements and deliverables as they apply to like strategic goals or vision and mission statements from the organization. And then I lead what I would call large size technical projects that may, the customer relationship management systems, the intranet sites that different organizations are using. So that's how I use data in my current role.
Thanks, Casey. So currently, I'm Linda Olszewski. Stephanie gave us a great introduction. You heard that I am currently an associate professor of business over at El Reno College, along with the director of the undergraduate business programs there. However, prior to making the transition to higher education, I worked for about 15 plus years at AT&T, so really large corporation. Started there as a software developer. So I started in their IT division, actually remained in their IT division, but kind of wanted to have this introduction of both Casey and myself to show you how that the power of data that we use in our career experiences, where that really is prevalent, and it isn't just in the IT realm. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more. So even though I started as a software developer and then led teams of architects and even did some system architecture as well, then I really moved to the business side of things over at AT&T and took that knowledge that I had about data and then led efforts on the business side with the business clients in terms of looking at sustainability and growth, and then doing some strategic planning and budgeting and forecasting. All of that was part of, or largely in part of, making sure that I was empowered with the use of an understanding of data. And again, we'll talk about a little bit more about that. So we wanted to start out with this kind of scintillating, talking about the myths about data, because there are so many out there. And so we've kind of selected a few that we want to talk about to serve as a primer to our discussion here. So this first myth, so myth number one, that is often said is, I only need to learn about data if I'm interested in pursuing a technology career. So oftentimes people think data goes hand in hand with IT or a technology career. I'll learn about it if I want to pursue that kind of career. However, so now we're debunking these myths here, and we would be remiss, right? This presentation is about empowering you with data. We would be remiss if we didn't share some data with you as well, right? So we have some statistics out there as to describing about the importance of data and how it drives decision-making in organizations. So the fact is, debunking this myth, the fact is that every career, every organization uses data. And the thing that we want to be able to impress upon everyone here today, and I know that we hear it often, that amount of data that organizations are harnessing, it is increasing exponentially. I mean, we can't even fathom the rate and the amount of data that is available that organizations are using and have available to them. So there's a statistic out there in 2018, a study done by McKinsey & Company. They actually found that there was a shortage of 1.5 million managers across all industries. So not industry specific at all, not career or role focus specific. There was a shortage of 1.5 million managers who actually were able to perform data analysis. and perform data analysis in terms of understanding it, using it, communicating with it to make data-driven decisions. And so organizations, by harnessing all of this data, that is what is driving the power of their innovation. That is what is driving the power of their decision-making. And so it really is an alarming figure that only continues to increase year over year of not having professionals equipped with the necessary data skills and data knowledge needed for where the business environment or landscape is going as to using data to be able to move organizations forward. So as they become increasingly data-driven, every professional, no matter what industry, and this is, why we're very fortunate to be able to talk about this topic today and very passionate about it. As professionals prepared who can read, analyze, and communicate with data, you are absolutely invaluable, and it puts you heads and shoulders above your competition in the industry, in the career roles, because it is such an important skill, but yet again, as you can see, there's such a major shortage of it. So myth number 2, let's go to myth number 2. That is important. It sure is. We'll recognize that it's important, but it's not my job. So if I'm in an organization, right, and I recognize that it's important, it really, though, is the responsibility of the IT department in my organization. So I get the directive from my IT department. Debunking this myth, we want to just kind of lay the claim out there, right? Data is here to stay. And we know this, but to be successful in what we're calling this data-driven economy, every single professional needs to have, at the very least, a basic understanding of it. And what does that mean if we have a basic understanding of it? So there was a just report issued about data management, data skills from Course Report just last year in February. And it said if every professional is equipped with these data skills, it opens up the opportunity and allows us the ability to, and listed there, communicate with technical team members. So bridge that gap of communication and language between technical and non-technical professionals. We as professionals become more independent in being able to solve problems, right? So we're not having to actually give our problems, right, to another department or another team to be able to solve it for us. If we can access the data and we have it available to us and we understand what it is that we have in front of us, we're able to be problem solvers independently, where we can get solutions more readily available, and also even a little bit more innovative thinking, right? If we're able to drive that with the data that is available and accessible to us, we're able to ask the right questions and make better decisions. So if we know about the data, and even if we don't know, right, but we have a data mindset where we have those kind of skills where we're thinking about what kind of information can inform us and can make us better equipped to do our roles or to make these decisions, we can ask those questions. We're better equipped to ask those questions, and that leads to better decision making. And then ultimately, we are equipped with the ability to have this data literacy to communicate what is something sometimes so difficult to communicate. We can communicate it with other stakeholders throughout the organization. So we can communicate it with our team members, our business clients, our leaders. And so when everybody has that same kind of basic language and can get on the same page, right, there's a lot of power that can come from that to be able to move the organization and individuals forward in looking at how to use that data to drive that. Okay, our last myth. Learning data skills is out of my range of abilities. It'll be difficult to do, and it'll take a lot of time. Okay, so we see that a lot in saying that, you know what, it's just kind of out of my purview. Data skills seem very complex. And so we want to debunk that myth. And we want to say, you know what, if we take a step back and we look at our daily lives and just what we do on a day-to-day basis, we already harness data skills. We already have them. And we may not be thinking about the abilities that we have already in terms of the different technologies that we have in our life that we're using these data skills for. So think about entertainment, right? With all of the streaming that's going on through Netflix and so all of the different technologies, all of the options that we have available to us, right? We are looking at our programming of our music, of our videos, of our shows. And so that is a data mindset, right? Or how we search on the internet, how we shop online, right? And how we kind of categorize and organize and streamline that to be able to find what we're looking for and to make it user-friendly for us, right? So that way it's efficient and it's productive. All of these technologies that we use on a day-to-day basis, we have an overwhelming amount of data that we're using, and we have the skills already. So what we're talking about here is making that transition of what we know and can do already, just honing those skills that maybe we inadvertently do not know or unconsciously do not know that we're already using, honing those skills in a way that we can make a transition to our career and what that looks like in an organization and how to develop those particular or further develop those skills so that way it provides growth for us as professionals and more opportunity for us. Okay, so debunking those myths, we want to then talk about understanding data in a way just at a very high level from in your own organizations. And as you think about data itself, where does it start, or where do we have to start as professionals to understand data at the very top, at the organizational level, right down to then how it impacts us as a user or as a professional working within that organization. So I'm going to turn it over to Tacey, and she has got a lot of information that she is going to share that will take you through that journey from organization right down to the professional user.
Thank you, Linda. I really appreciate that. It's really ironic that we just debunked all of those myths. And then here I am to explain organizational data to you, and I do work in IT. So I am the person that sometimes people call to gain access to their information or their data. What I'd like to talk to you about today is not just organizational strategy, but also the how, I guess, of the data and how we, as users, can assist with driving a data culture. So organizational strategy, what we want to think about when we think about how that looks in an organization is going to be familiarizing yourself with the vision, mission, and the strategy of a particular organization. So for instance, data should support not only decisions within an organization, but it should also parallel what their vision and mission statement is. If their goal is to be customer focused, then we need to understand how we use the data to drive that mission or that vision. We're also thinking about identifying and understanding stakeholders. So I know Linda talked about that a little bit in the debunking the myths, but ultimately when you think about a stakeholder, what you're thinking about is somebody that will either be impacted by your use of data or will help you get the answers that you need to make decisions. So ultimately that's who you're thinking about. You're also thinking about leadership because they're going to sponsor your data projects. So what we find in IT is that we need somebody that to be a champion for a data project. There may be a way that you want to do something or a way that you need to access data. And sometimes that has to go through a leadership channel for approval. So you need to be able to identify who that's going to be for you. Also acquiring and managing requirements. So when we think about requirements, you're thinking about someone comes to you and they say they need a sales report. They want to understand what year over year is or the margin difference from year to year. With that being said, that may be one requirement. Another requirement might be where you get that data from. There may be 4 or 5 different places within the organization that have bits and pieces of that information, but you want to understand what the source of record is. That's going to be the master record or the best place to get that data from. Another thing that I always like to think about, which is a business analysis trait that you'll be looking at in organizations, is understanding and identifying the organizational maturity level. With that being said, you have large organizations sometimes that are more mature than smaller organizations or mid-sized organizations. Reason being is because certain people may be wearing multiple hats. You may find that the IT person is also doing the reporting. But what you'll also get to know is that throughout that process, when we talk about users and users accessing data, me in IT, I may know a lot about the IT domain. However, if I'm trying to create a sales report, it might be best for me to talk to someone in sales because they'll be my system matter expert in that instance. Meaning that they know what they're looking for, they know what data they've got already, and they know what they may need to get from somewhere else. So you need to remember that kind of when working towards that organizational strategy. You may not necessarily work in IT, but you may be inadvertently a part of one of those projects. And so it's great if you can hand off that information that's necessary to complete a project or help drive that data culture. You can turn the slide, Linda. So when we think about the user standpoint, what we want to think about is organizational strategy alignment. So one thing to remember is that IT, when we say, data is not my job, it's the, job responsibility of IT. In some instances, that may be correct. Again, we're still thinking about those domain leaders and users as our system matter experts. So, we're heavily involved in communicating and asking questions, interviewing them and things like that to get the information that we need to be able to drive success. So we're aligning those cross-functional or functional teams based on those requirements. So originally, there's a plan for success. And this is how we get there. It's cross-functional, meaning there might be multiple people from multiple different departments that help drive success of that project based on the requirements that were originally given. There may be what we call a discovery portion where we find that there are bits and pieces that are missing from our project plan. And so we want to add those back. That's why it's important that we're talking with those end users and with other departments to be able to, kind of drive that success. It's also important that we understand software development or deployment frameworks. In doing so, again, you want to make sure, and the discovery piece is a business analysis tactic that's used to solicit or elicit requirements. That means that there's a certain type of process that you need to take to get the right information. Sometimes having an open-ended conversation with somebody can also lead to success, but sometimes it might be better to ask more closed-ended questions or yes or no questions, or just shadow someone to understand what their job functionality may be and where they're actually getting data from. We also want to work with those functional teams to model processes and data in current state and future state. So when we talk about current state and future state, we talk about where is the organization right now with how they're using data. Again, you may have maybe the IT department manages a data warehouse for the marketing department, but maybe HR uses more of a human resources information system, and that information doesn't go to the data warehouse. And then somebody else in a different department might just have a spreadsheet that they're keeping track of things on. And so we want to understand that. We want to, in its entirety, that gives us a complete picture of what the current state is. And then what we want to do is we want to use a uniform modeling language or some form of diagramming to understand, this is how it is, and here's what we're trying to do. How do we get there? In the course of doing that, you can find that some processes are redundant, meaning that there's, two different ways to do it. It's ending up in the same result. So how do we combine those two processes to, not just for scalability, but making that easier for users to be able to partake in that process, maybe streamline it so that the whole department can do it, as opposed to just having that one system matter expert in one particular area of the organization. You want to understand and be able to produce a logical and physical design of data flow. Now, I know that it may sound extravagant when we say it that way, but really what it is, it's taking those communications that you have with other people from other domains. Again, you might be talking to HR or marketing or student services or sales. Those types of communications we want to keep track of, and how we produce something that if we were to present it back to a larger group or present it to the leadership, that they would be able to follow along with us and be able to identify areas for improvement, or be able to align with that process, whether it be current state or future state. So as well, when we talk about from a user standpoint, whether it be IT or end user, we're thinking about still that alignment of the original vision and mission, and being able to complete the project as are set by the requirements. And in doing that, we need to provide consistent and clean data. What that means, and I always give this example, say for instance, you've got a record and it holds first name and last name. Well, there might be 3 records for the same person. One might have all capital letters. Another one might have, the first letter is uppercase and the rest are lowercase. And then one might have all lowercase letters. In doing that, on the back end, it's going to hold 3 specific records for the same person. So what we want to do is seek to provide some more consistency and cleanliness. When we talk about that data, we want one source of record that's a master record for that person. And so how do we merge those things together to make one? So that's one way of looking at it. Another way would be able to use that data that we have, no matter what system it's coming out of, whether it be in an Excel spreadsheet or database or an HRIS or human resources information system. How do we use that data and turn it into visualization for functional teams? Again, although the audience may be different, so you think about, presenting something to your peers versus presenting something to your leaders, the visualization should be consistent. Hence the reason that I kind of bring up that UML, or uniform modeling language, because that uniform modeling language is a set of tiny icons or pictures that are universal to no matter who you show that to. They'll be able to understand that the diamond represents a decision, that a square represents a process or a sub-process, that little tiny circle at the beginning or the end represents the beginning or the end of a process. And that's universal to people in IT. And it has really great readability for other domains. So we want to make sure that we're using something that's universal and not something that we've kind of concocted on our own, because it may be difficult for users to digest that or interpret it visually. We want to familiarize ourselves with a variety of tools that can help create data visualization. So I bring this up because, organizations are going to have a budget. When they have strategic initiatives that they want to drive, they've got not only a budget, but also typically softwares that they probably already have licensing for, or they've got a particular type of software in mind that they want you to use for data visualization. So it's going to be good to familiarize yourself with a few. Most of them, if you understand the logic of creating a report, front end wise, it'll just be kind of learning what that syntax looks like in that particular tool. But even at its most basic form, data visualization can be done with Excel. And I bring Excel up because even as a programmer, I'm still doing reports in Excel, and I actually use it to prepare my code to, if I'm doing like a batch file import, I use SQL, SQL to do that. But front end, when I'm trying to get, say, 1,000 rows ready to import, I'm using Excel. So Excel can be a powerful tool for data visualization. So I know a lot of people assume that, if they're looking at data, it has to be, some fancy visualization tool like Tableau or Power BI or SQL, but it doesn't. Excel can be powerful as well. So if you're using those tools in your organization, that's a great tool to use. And any information that you can put in there, you can also create visualizations from as well. And so once we get to that point, after we've taken a look and made sure that we're in alignment with the strategic initiatives of an organization, and we've had those communications and conversations with other business domain users, and to some extent we've modeled the processes, we know what data we need, we've cleaned that data and made it consistent. We've allowed the teams to visualize what that data and process looks like for us. And then at the end, the very, very end, we're using all of those processes to make decisions with that data. Of course, there's a lot of things that go into not only making the decision, but also preparing the data to make the decision. But these are all pieces that every end user is a part of. So from an IT perspective, yes, IT may help you create the reports and things, but end users are very instrumental to how well we get things done and how quickly we get things done.
Thanks, Lacey. That was
You're
really good information. Thank you. So I'm just going to build off of what Tacey had shared. So we had a really kind of a structure in mind for this discussion, but we didn't want to take up the whole entire time because we wanted just to be able to have a little bit of a conversation with those attending. If you have questions or maybe talk about some of your roles that you are doing right now in your organizations or where you're looking to go. But one of the things that we really wanted to make sure that we talked with you all about are really putting names to those data skills that are needed for any kind of professional in any career in any industry. And this is going to be really, really important. And so we both have backgrounds in working with a lot of data on the IT side and then also, again, on the business side. So as we had shared before, it's not a particular industry per se, right, where you need to know this. It's for all industries and all roles. And so as part of a program that we created at Alverno called Pivot Your Skills, we have a data pathway there. And what has informed that, developing that data pathway for professionals to go through, it was going out and talking to not just getting like national statistical data about what data skills are needed, but let's talk about the data skills that are needed for our professionals right in our hometown here. Of all the organizations that we're working with in our business community, large organizations, small organizations, nonprofit, for-profit, what is it that they're seeing that are gaps in those data skills that are really, really needed for any kind of professional, and that is really making professionals stand out among all other professionals? And we'll even go as far to say that what we've been seeing in the research and what we've been hearing from the industry leaders that we've been talking with is that if professionals have these data skills, right, it is likened to a lot of job security for those professionals because there aren't enough professionals that actually know how to communicate using data. And so we wanted to make sure that we were leaving you all with this kind of at the end, and this could be leverage or a talking point as you think about where you are in your roles, where you would like to go within your career development, just thinking about everything that you do on a daily basis in your own career roles and how that plays into what you're doing and maybe some opportunity for advancement for you. Again, we would be remiss if not sharing data with you. So we wanted to give you some information that we have from our research. And so from a study that was done a couple years ago in 2015, both from PwC and Iron Mountain, they went ahead and did an extensive survey and found that from all different companies across all different industries, only 4% of the companies, and we're talking about this is large cap, small cap, not-for-profit, for-profit, only 4% of the companies had said that they actually had employees with the skills they needed to make the best use of the data that they collect. And I just kind of want to put that in perspective because that gap continues to widen the more that we don't have professionals equipped with those data skills, because the amount of data that the organizations are harnessing, right, is increasing, as we had talked about at the beginning, exponentially. And if our employees or prospective professionals aren't keeping pace to be able to use the data that is available, right, we are not extracting the power of what it can really do, not only for our organizations, but our own professional growth. And so just in 2020, Forbes did an extensive research project and found and quoted that, yes, there is and will continue to be a great demand for professionals who possess data skills. And in that particular article talked about it being one of the most sought after skills for any professional, and on top of that, talked about the job security. So as we just kind of pause a little bit and we take a look at the environment that we're in right now, right? Pre-COVID, we had a situation where there was a skills gap and organizations could not find enough talent to fill the positions that they had open because they were looking for specific skill sets, and data skills being one of them. COVID hits, and now we're in a brand new environment and we're trying to figure out what is going to be the path forward and how to navigate out of this, of what we're experiencing right now. Well, organizations are seeing a lot of different things about themselves that they haven't seen before. They're seeing different ways that they can operate as a result. And so those opportunities that were there pre-COVID aren't necessarily as in abundance as they were before. And we're seeing that with the job reports, not only locally and nationally. But the thing that hasn't changed is that the organizations now have gotten more laser focused in terms of looking at that skills gap and saying that those individuals or professionals that we're going to invest in, they're the ones that we're looking for that surely have some of their top skills to be these data skills that Tasty and I are going to share with you in just a second. So we want you to know that we weren't just taking this research at a national level. We're very tuned into what's happening in our own communities and in our own organizations as to what they're looking for. And so those data skills that we're going to be talking about are those data skills that the industry leaders are talking about today, about that skills gap. So as you think about the value that you can bring to an organization, if you are equipping yourself with these data skills, right, this gap that we're talking about that is very real provides, looking at it optimistically, a really great opportunity for professionals, and especially for women. This really is a great catalyst for women to equip themselves with a technical skill like this, that then we can, armed with this kind of skill, bring our unique functional expertise as well as to what we bring, combine that, integrate it, and it provides a pathway, opens up a pathway for growth and opportunity that is incomparable. So looking at the data, again, it's not just, do I just have to focus on data skills? And what about all of the functional expertise that I bring that is part of my kind of unique repertoire of skills? No, we're not saying that doesn't go away, but we're saying that it's really important to supplement the unique functional expertise that you bring with the complement of understanding how data is important in no matter no matter what role or industry that you're in. So we're talking about HR, right? If you are in it or going into HR or financial services or manufacturing or healthcare, all of them are data driven. And so the more that we can become data literate and integrate that with our own unique career skills and knowledge, that functional expertise, the more powerful we become as professionals. And again, more highly sought after, more opportunity. And so there was a recent report done in 2019 that said of the skills that we see growing, 3 skills that are really, really important are data interpretation, visualization, and communication. And Burning Glass is actually a national firm, and they work with all kinds of organizations in higher education. So Alverno actually works with Burning Glass. That takes, and they are a company that works with data. So they are taking their business model and they're saying, we can go ahead and we can analyze this exponential amount of data that's happening in the economy, in your communities. And we're seeing job needs and we're seeing career opportunities. So that's really kind of their business model and their focus of what they do as a company. And so it was powerful information for them to see of the skills that we actually need as professionals. These 3 areas are the most important, and we don't see that like going away really ever. Data is going to only continue to increase. So how do we make sure that we know how to understand it, visualize it, and communicate with it? So this is really a jam-packed list, and we're kind of ending our presentation with this because we want to and hope maybe there will be some questions to talk a little bit more about these skills specifically that are needed for professionals today. Number 1, first and foremost, is that data literacy. So we all use data in our jobs today, and it's understanding not only the data that we use better, but understanding the data that we don't use and what could be available to us that we already have as an organization, but that we just don't know is there. And so when we're getting to learn about that data, it's twofold when we think about data literacy. We have to understand what it is that we have or know what we don't know and be able to seek out that information, right? What the kinds of questions that we have when we do our roles and we do our jobs, right? The questions that we're asking, a lot could be answered with data that what our organizations already have, other teams already have, other departments already have. And so it's being able to understand what we're using and what we don't know that we could ask for that maybe could make our role or our performance better. So it's taking that data and it's understanding it. But then what is most difficult and is the most sought after skill that organizational leaders are saying time and time again is that it's one thing for professionals to understand the data, but they need to be able to communicate it to the stakeholders. They need to communicate it to others that don't have the same knowledge, that aren't as data literate. And so really our job as professionals in using data isn't just harnessing the power of it to see what it can do, but our job is also education. Education as part of ourselves as professional and education for others, so that way we can help others prepare in those same skills to be data literate as well. It's the language of the organizations in the future. It is now and it will forever be in the future. So we need to kind of learn this language of business here that at the heart is all embedded in all kinds of data. Data extraction and preparation. Okay, it sounds techy, but it's not. It's about the process of how do we get that data, right? So we're communicating, we've got the language that we need to be able to talk to each other, and we have that data literacy, but how do we get that data, right? We're asking the questions and maybe we don't have it at our fingertips, but there's another department or there's somebody else that does, or maybe we don't know, and it's asking those questions to try to seek that information. that makes us then, again, more prepared to be able to be independent, like we talked about in the myths, right? If we can say that data is everyone's job, it makes us more independent, and then actually at the same time more effective, more strategic in our role. So that data extraction is just a matter of understanding, how do we get that data? And then how can we use it in a way that we can prepare it, so that other end of the piece for that skill, data preparation, is really talking about how can we set up that data in a way that we can use it. We make it accessible, we make it usable, we can talk about it, we can share it. And Tacy had talked about some tools that are available out there, and there are so many. So, and we know that can get daunting, right? And it depends, and that's daunting for organizations, and trying to figure out what tools do we use, and what are the best tools that we use, and how do we educate our employees on how to use that. I put Microsoft Excel there in parentheses because, as Tacy had shared when she was going through just looking at organizational strategy and alignment, Microsoft Excel, still one of the most sought after, but yet here's what we know and we see, and we've been told by organizational leaders, is that individuals that are using Microsoft Excel oftentimes can't use it beyond what would be considered a document application, right? Just to put the data into Microsoft Excel, but not be able to use it as an engine for making our data come to life. So investing in that ability to be able to just use what we have at our fingertips today, that probably many of you are already using Microsoft Excel, to be able to understand how to get to a little bit deeper level of understanding how to use that Microsoft Excel as a powerful data engine. It becomes one of the most sought after skills that organizational leaders are looking for. Data and business analysis, when you look at that and you're thinking, okay, well, what does that really mean? If you think about data and business analysis, it isn't just in the realm of, I'm trying to communicate data from a place in the organization that is IT related, and I'm trying to communicate that data to clients. That isn't necessarily what data and business analysis is. And so I want to talk about it in the larger sense of, when we're looking at business analysis, it doesn't just mean, okay, IT and business client. It means, what if we're doing project planning? What if we're doing strategy planning, and we're looking at our own strategic objectives? And how do we go ahead and create this overarching scorecard for our business, where we're looking at strategy, and then we're bringing in kind of external impact and internal influences and all of those pieces that we can relate to in our work? How do we bring that together, where then we are using data to inform those pieces of information as part of our roles, and then bring that to life with that data? So if you think about business analysis or data analysis, it's again going back to, think about what you're doing in your role as a professional, or any professional, right? Think about what they're doing. Data is at the heart of it. And if we're not using data, right, we're not informing our decision making the best that we can. So how do we get that data, and in any type of activity that we're doing, make sure that we are drawing upon that and using it in a way that is informing our decision making, and then of course making it accessible to others. And part of that accessibility is creating a visualization strategy. So Tacy talked about this greatly when she was looking at the organizational strategy and alignment, and we really want to impress upon this here. This is really, really important data visualization. And we put in parentheses here, storytelling, because that is the wave of the future. If you can tell a story with data and learn how to, again, build your data literacy to understand it and communicate it, If we think about storytelling as that is what is most engaging, right? If someone can tell a story, it's almost like rapture. They have engaged us and we were bought in and we are listening intently. And so when we think about data, right, and storytelling, like, okay, that doesn't really go together because data is kind of boring, right? We're just kind of listing off data. But then we've got storytelling, and that's really engaging and exciting. Yeah, data can do that. You can do that with and through storytelling if you can make the data come to life through visualization. And there's all different kinds of tools, like Tacey had talked about, all different kinds of tools that you can make that data come to life. And your organization is probably using some, and you may or may not use them, but they are tools that you should have in your arsenal to be able to draw upon that skill. So if your organization or your teams aren't using them, oh my gosh, you enter this into your team or your department or your organization, it's gold, because this is a tool or a skill that you'll have that really you're bridging that language gap, because you're seeing that data is hard to understand. But if you can put it in a visualization and you can build the skill of telling a story with it, that's how many more people buy into it. And that's how many more people are then educated as well as a result of what you're sharing. And then finally, we identified data trend identification. This is a skill where, after we've gone through kind of all of these skills and we talked about how there's a cohesion here, and hopefully you see that there's a cohesion here among all of these skills, right? It's then looking at us and saying, okay, well, what is the data telling us? And how do we look at that over a period of time, right? So if we're doing strategic planning, or if we're doing budgeting, or if we're doing forecasting, or we're doing staffing, or whatever the case may be, what is that trend that then we're looking at as we're harnessing that data? It's not just informing where we go, but our history informs us, right, in terms of where we are now and where we want to go. And if we think about putting data in that context, if we're collecting that data and we have that available to us, data is part of our history. And if we look at our history and we're studying that, puts it in context of where we are today, and we can then use that data to build a trajectory going forward. So it informs not only the current or the future decision making. And I can't stress enough here that kind of depiction of past, present, future. Data informs it all. So if we have the literacy and we know how to use it and can prepare it, and we can transfer the ability of our skills to any kind of responsibility that we have in our role, right? Because data is at the heart of all of it, and we can visualize it and create stories with it. Then we can inform our kind of current state and our future state by drawing upon what we know and what we can do and use with it going forward.